to the Camunda User Group hosted by NTConsult. My name is Onwin Parmley. As people start filing in, I would love to share a little bit about NTConsult, my company. We were founded in 2003, so we have 20 years of experience in the software development world. Headquartered in San Diego, and we have about 500 technology team members scattered throughout 8 different countries, mostly in Latin America. And we live and breathe in the business process automation space. And that's why we're a perfect fit to be partnered with Camunda. We took over hosting the Camunda Group last year, and we are excited to develop a San Diego community of Camunda users, considering our San Diego headquarters and our platinum partnership with Camunda. The goal of the meetup is to develop a line of communication with the Camunda user and with our awesome developers from Camunda, from NTConsult, and from wherever we can find somebody to present and host. So we are excited to host many more of these events, and we welcome any suggestions from the user of people we can bring on, or suggestions of topics, because we love to continue to do this for you guys. We will have a Q&A at the end, so please save all questions at the end. But if you have any, put them in the chat or put in comments in the chat. We would love to hear from you the whole time. We have a super cool topic today. It will be about the coolest features of Camunda. And I'm super excited to introduce Kevin and Emilio. Emilio is our technical sales engineer at NTConsult and is senior business analyst with business expertise working in global distributed teams. He is very skilled at mediating conversation between business, customers, and technical team. And then Kevin is a senior sales engineer at Camunda. He's located in Charlotte and has 10 plus years of experience. He's been a member of the Camunda team for over 2 years, and he works with the technical implementation of the product and is very knowledgeable about all things Camunda. So we invite Kevin to go ahead and start sharing the screen and get on with the demo.
All right. Now it sounds great. Hopefully I'm sharing my screen now.
Yeah, looks great.
Perfect. All right. Awesome. Yeah, so thanks everybody for joining. As Anwin said, I'm Kevin Coronato, Senior Sales Engineer, and happy to walk you through a number of new features that we're bringing to the platform. So we certainly want to highlight, what are some of the most exciting features of Camunda. There's quite a few, right? So we have our work cut out for us in, whittling this list down. But what I thought would be fun and kind of consistent with what we're releasing in the future is we really wanted to highlight for you today some of the newer features that are coming in version 8.3 of our product, right? So we have some of these available to test today and some relatively new features that have already been released. They were intended to be released with 8.3, but they've been now released early that we can actually already start to play around with. So we can look at this as not only like what are the coolest features of Camunda today, but also, what are the coolest of the upcoming features that you'll see with our 8.3 release coming in October. So some of those items that we'll look at today, have a few of them listed here. There's actually more that I didn't add to this presentation, but if we have time, I'd like to go over them. But we're going to look at things like, for example, Camunda Forms. There's been a lot of advancement with our Camunda Forms, and we can do things now like start processes with Camunda Forms. We have forms available in our task list application, right, which anyone familiar with Camunda 7 will remember being able to launch and start processes without code, just pulling up a nice Camunda form in their task list app. We've now brought that to Camunda version 8. We can now attach forms directly visually in the process model that I'll show you today. So a number of new enhancements to our forms. We also have form generation with ChatGPT. So in our form builder, we just added a new feature where we can actually write a prompt to ChatGPT and have it generate a Camunda form for us. So we'll take a look at that. We also wanted to highlight connectors. So, overall, when we're looking at Camunda Platform 8 and really thinking about, the future of our platform and the direction, right, that we really want to take the product, connectors has been a key focus for us. We intend to keep growing our existing connector ecosystem, as well as bring enhancements to how our users can build and reuse their connectors. So most recently, we implemented new functionality around saving connectors as templates and reusing those connectors and making them available within your projects and organizationally wide, right, to other users. So we could highlight that today. We've also had a number, again, kind of sticking with the theme of connectors, inbound and outbound connectors. We're really going to focus today on the HTTP webhook because that's quite universal, quite widely used. And we've seen, since we've released this just internally at Camunda, right, we've all been making extensive use of the HTTP webhook. So we can discuss, some strategies around that, where it's effective, when and why you might want to use this. And then finally, if we have time, I want to take a look at Optimize. Optimize is our business intelligence-like tool. Really, it's a process intelligence tool for creating reports and dashboards, right, on the data that we've generated as we've been, running our business processes. We have a new dashboard that we've released, added to the templates, amongst other things. And we have some other components in there that I wanted to show you. All right, so without further ado, we could just dive right in. And so, right, one of the new features that we've recently released are start forms. So what we can do when we're designing and modeling our process, and I'll show this to you live in our modeler in just a moment, we can, on a start event of a process, now actually attach Camunda Forms. So previously you couldn't do this, right? If you wanted to start a process, right, we could use the Camunda client library to do this. Any gRPC-based client, right? We could send a command to Camunda to start a process with the associated data, right? But problem with that is you needed to maybe be a developer, write some code to launch your processes. Now that we can attach Camunda Forms to the start event, what's really nice is it lets everybody else, right? You don't need to be a developer or have any programming skills to actually now fully design processes end to end, as well as start and launch them, right? So we can attach these Camunda Forms to the start of a process, and we can actually view these forms in a number of different ways, which I'll show you. So let's go ahead and actually just switch over to our web modeler. So I'm here in actually my web browser. This is what we're looking at here is just our management console, right? So for anybody that's familiar with Camunda 8, and actually what we're looking at today is Camunda 8 SaaS. So I should mention that, right? Camunda 8, latest version of the Camunda platform, which is offered in two flavors, the SaaS platform that we're going to cover today, but also self-managed. And both platforms really give you all the same sort of tooling and components, right, to build out and run these business processes. But what we're going to look at is SaaS for now. So again, Management Console, this is where you can go and just launch all your applications, which I actually already have opened up in new tabs here. So let's go ahead and just look at that. So I'm going to open up my modeler. Now I do have just a project folder, right, that has the diagram that we could actually run today, as well as some of the supporting resources that I added to this model. But let's just open up the BPM model for now. And real quickly, just to highlight what this process is going to be doing that I'll actually run today. Really small, simple process, really just kind of wanted to highlight some of the features, the topics of discussion for today. But just to take you through, a thought I had was, hey, let's model some sort of scenario where we run a business, a user wants to update their account details, right? And to do this, maybe the user is going to fill out a form, right? That is, we could have brought our own user interface, or in this case, right, we want to demonstrate Camunda Forms. So in this process, right, the user is going to fill out a form. They want to update account details of some sort. Now, when I click the start event, you'll notice this little blue icon down here. It looks like a sheet of paper. If I click on that, we get a form preview. So I've actually already attached a form to the start event. But let me just go ahead and actually remove that form. So if you just modeled your process as usual, up to this point in Camunda, you'd have something that looks like this. But what we can do, if we want to use Camunda Forms, click the start event. You can click that little blue icon, right, that looks like a sheet of paper. Now, this dropdown is actually going to show you all of the Camunda forms that are in your project right now, right? So if I go back to my project folder, you'll see I have a BPMN diagram. I have some connectors, but I do have a form. So this is a form that I created that will display on the start event now, right, if I attach it. So here's the form. It's already been pre-configured. But let's say we wanted to go ahead and create a new form, right? And we could also highlight our AI form generator, right, in that regard as well. Actually, let me get to that next. But let's go back to that start event. So I'll open up my diagram, right? I have that form that was created in the form builder. So let's just say we created that from scratch by hand for now. And we can just click the start event, attach that form, click embed, right? So we highlight the form, click embed. And now if we click this little drop down, we'll see the preview of that form rendered here, right? So when I start the process, I will now see this form here. Now, another thing to note is on the properties panel over here on the right-hand side, right? So when you click an element, if it's not expanded, you can click this little icon on the right, open up that properties panel. Now, what we can do here, so to run the process, couple things, right? You'll notice we have this new little flag right here under publication. So by default, if I attach a user tab or a Camunda form to the start of this process, I can deploy the process to my cluster. And if I actually want to run the process, I'm going to find the process in my task list application. What we can also do, if I toggle this little switch right here that says public access enabled, what this will do, Camunda will actually render a page for us. And it'll generate a URL that we can visit that will just display that form. We don't have to log into any Camunda apps. All right, this is like a public form that anybody can access. Fill out the details, hit submit, and we're going to start a process. So let's actually go ahead and do that here, right? So I'll toggle that switch. The form is embedded, and we really don't need to worry about anything else in here. The only thing we need to actually do now is actually deploy the process. So I'll click deploy. I have a number of Camunda clusters here, so I'll just make sure that the cluster I want to run on is selected. That looks good, and I'll click deploy. So I got a confirmation it's deployed. Let me refresh this page. Now, if you want to access the form, what we do, so now once you have to deploy the process first, but re-click that start event, open up the properties panel, and you'll see this new tab in your properties panel here. It says publication. If you click that link, you're going to get a new URL here, right? So I could just copy that, paste it into my browser. And now I actually have that new form rendered right here, right? So this is the form that I can fill out, hosted by Camunda, right? You don't need to log in and access this form. So this is a great way to start testing out our process, right? So I can actually go ahead, fill out this form here, and launch a new process, right? This is really great for, testing when you're doing dev, development. You want to get this in front of your end users. Adding Camunda Forms right to the start event is a great way to kind of enhance that, speed up development and testing. All right, so I just submitted that form. So I actually have a process that's already started. And we could even view that process if I open up Operate. I can see I have a running process here that is currently active, right? So we'll take a look at this again in just a little bit. All right, so that is launching the process, right, and attaching a form to a start event, which is pretty nifty. If I go back here, I believe the next item we wanted to talk about, speaking of forms, right, brand new feature we added to actually generate these forms, like the form you just saw, with ChatGPT. So in our form builder, we added a new button in there. So on the left-hand side, where we have all the components that we can drag and drop to our form, we added a new button that is highlighted in blue to generate a form, right? Why would we want to do this? Well, it can help kind of, as you're initially thinking about, hey, I have this scenario, this process, I want to build a form, for example, like a loan approval request, as one example we've documented here, right? We could just type that in and see what ChatGPT returns back to us. These can be great starting points to have most of the elements of the form that you might want to build already there existing. They'll even be wired up and connected to the process variables in a process too, right? So you can ChatGPT, the form it returns will already be configured, right? Fields mapping to process variables as well. So let's go ahead and take a look at that right now to see how that's developed, right? So I'll go back to my web browser. I'll go back to my project folder, right? And what I really want to do is create a new Camunda form. So we already have an existing form. Don't necessarily want to touch that, but I'll just select new, and then I'll come down and select form. So this is the form builder editing canvas, right? And what we normally do is over here on the left, you have this panel where you can say, start to drag and drop, different elements onto a page, right? And start constructing our field. And we could do that manually. And you can, over here in this properties panel on the right, start to, manually add in all those technical details that you see here. So we could go through that process. But now what we can also do is, let me just delete all this. Here we have this new button that says AI form generator. If we click on that, we just get a simple prompt, right? So for example, we could really enter in anything here. So let's just say a form to update a user's account information. All right, let's enter something like that. Let's see what ChatGPT returns. So the form I just created by hand, but interesting to see what this returns. So I can submit that form, and this could take up to a minute to generate. But while that is thinking about the problem, right? So what's nice about this is we could still use this as a template, right? The form that it returns is not set in stone. We could still modify, add, remove, details here in our form builder, but ultimately just kind of let this build the form for us as a source of inspiration, right? And then once we generate that form, we can attach it still anywhere that we want in a process, right? Or make it reusable even in other projects. All right. Should take just a few more seconds here.
There is a question in the chat if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, let's talk about that while this is running.
Cool. Paul says that looked very interesting. Is it on the roadmap that this will be available on self-managed at some point?
Yes, great question. I don't specifically know if this is on the roadmap for self-managed. I can imagine that with the form generator, we are running probably some connector component, right, to generate this. So I guess long story short, I don't know, unfortunately, if this is on the roadmap for self-managed.
That is TBD. We'll let you know in the future when we know.
But generally, I will say generally, we strive for feature parity, right, with regards to the features in SaaS, the features in self-managed, and try to bring those together. So unfortunately, something went wrong, as is to be expected in a alpha demo environment. I'll try again, just let this run in the background. So I can add another prompt. Reason this will fail, sometimes it just will time out. Since this is still in alpha, we're just kind of using the public API for ChatGPT. So we're competing with, obviously lots of people hitting that API. So I think generally it's just timing out on us. But right, when we release this, I think for more like general production grade use, obviously we're going to, not be competing with the public API here. So let's a form. Let's just go a loan. Some example that we've got documented. All right, so I'm just going to let that run in the background for now, right? And then we can just switch over and proceed onwards to new things. All right, so let me go ahead, open my web modeler again. All right, so we'll trust that form builder at a point is going to generate a nice form for us that we can come back to. But yeah, the process is pretty simple, as you saw. Open up the form builder, click the generate, form with AI button, and should, in most situations, generate a nice form for us that we can continue to go ahead and edit. Next thing I wanted to talk about, which you may have already seen in the process model that I was showing on screen, are some of our new connectors. One of those is Twilio. So we now have both an inbound and an outbound connector for Twilio, amongst other things. And Twilio has actually been a pretty fun connector to play around with. Actually, as a matter of fact, I've had my phone on silent, so I wish I turned it off silent. When I started that process originally, Twilio just sent me a text message as well in the process that I've shown you. So this is great. We can, and with Twilio, we're able to access our process variables, send those in messages to customers. We can also respond back to messages being received from Twilio as well, right? And so way we could set that up, didn't mean to proceed on. Let me move over to my web browser. Actually, let's see. Did we? It did generate a form. Okay, I just wanted to check back on that form. So I put in a different prompt. This was the form previously generated by ChatGPT, right? So I changed the prompt, just a different use case, but it did return back this loan approval request type form. And you can see here, it's actually generating a Camunda form. So if I click on each field, right, like the person, their name, we get, a process variable full name, their email tied to their email, their phone number, etc. Right? It even adds in like a drop down for the loan amount, the loan start date, and so on and so forth. Right? So we get all these nice details, and you can save and just edit these forms at a later date, right? That are generated with ChatGPT. So that's pretty cool. All right. Let me go back to our modeler here for a moment. Open up the diagram, right? We were talking about this Twilio connector for sending and receiving messages. So right here we have, that's my Twilio connector, right? So when I launched this process and I filled out that Camunda form, it's actually sending me a text message, which I filled out over here, right? So you could fill out these properties panels. So Twilio is just a connector like other Camunda connectors. And the way that we add that to the model is quite simply, if we're going to like drag and drop a new element or step in our process, right? We just click this little wrench icon. We get this nice drop down, and you can just scroll down. Once you get past all the BPMN elements at the top, you'll see a list for connectors, and you can see a list of the number of the connectors that we already have available today. Most popular by far is this REST connector. I'll just point that out real quick, right? So REST connector is great. You can call out to pretty much any endpoint, right? You have your different over here on the right in the properties panel, right, is where we configure the REST connector. You can make a GET request, a POST request. You specify, the endpoint that you want to call, your data payload, any query parameters, right? We can add all that data in here. You're going to get a response. You can pull the response back out, from that, call and so on. So that's by far the most commonly used, but we have other connectors here as well, like Slack. Google Drive is one of our latest connectors. We also now have connectors for AWS, SQS, and SNS, right? Kafka, RabbitMQ as well. But the one that I'm leveraging here that I've been playing around with recently, that's a lot of fun, is Twilio, right? So you can just select that, and then you fill out the properties panel, which I already have configured above. So Twilio, what's great, again, you can access your process data. You can pass it in the messages being sent to the end user. You define, the number that you're going to send a text message to and where it's coming from and everything like that, right? So let me go ahead and actually maybe run a process quickly one more time. I've got my phone turned on. Maybe now you'll be able to hear the text message come through. So let me just kick off a real process real quick. And then talking about this connector, right, is going to just be a nice segue also into the next topic around connector templates as well. Let's just go ahead and do that. Enter some information in. There we go. Kick off a new process. And there we go. Just got a new text. That one was a little bit muted. Maybe you heard that, maybe you didn't, but I've got a new message sent from my Twilio trial account. We received a request to update your account. To confirm this request, please reply back with yes or no. So I can send like a yes or no response back and move this process along, which could have been done at the next step. Instead, I decided to add another new feature that we wanted to highlight, which are webhooks, right? So since that's the next step in the process, we could just go ahead and address that now. So what's great about webhooks is this is just an event that you can add anywhere in your process, right? And with events in BPMN, basically whatever steps we execute, when we reach an event, we're just going to wait here until that event triggers, right? In the case of a webhook, this isn't, an inbound webhook, meaning we're waiting for some external event to send us, right, a notification that something happened. In this case, right, in my process, this whole like update account details process, a user filled out the form, we sent them a text message for confirmation. They, text us back like yes or no, and then we basically want to receive that response, right? One way I could have actually implemented this was also with the Twilio connector to get the response back, but I just kind of wanted an excuse to show you the webhook. So, for example, let's say the user sends a text message back, and now Twilio calls our webhook, right, when they receive the response. So we have this webhook defined, and you can define it in the properties panel over here. So basically, you just give your webhook like an ID. This is going to be basically the endpoint that we're calling. Now, when we add a webhook to our process model, right, we just give it an ID. That's effectively like the endpoint we're going to call. But we also need to add a couple other details. You basically need a unique key to, like, how do we know, right, when somebody calls Camunda to tie it to the right running process? That's called a correlation key, and that's how we tie it to basically a process variable that's going to be unique. Now, in my scenario, I'm imagining a user's account is tied to their email. So if they make a request, I'm just tying it to an email. But in the real world, maybe it's like an account ID or something like that that is unique, right? Or a request ID. So that's your correlation key. And then we're just like extracting that, right, from the response. So this is how we really configure it. And then if you have data, like a data payload coming in, you can extract that here, again, configured all through the properties panel. So we can actually run this webhook, right? So this is my modeler. Now, again, when you add a webhook, you have to deploy it to your cluster, and then Camunda will generate a URL for you, right? So if I click webhook, let me refresh my page. Right, so again, to get the URL that you're going to want to call, click the webhook tab, and now you're going to get the URLs, right? So you can see I've actually got this deployed to multiple clusters. So I actually have like multiple, URLs for using this connector, which is fine. So that's how you get the URL. And now, right, actually, if I go over to Operate, and Operate, if I just go to our dashboard real quick, right, Operate is our web application where you really get visibility into your processes running, right? What's in flight, the data associated with them, their current state. So here in the Operate app, I can open up my process here. I can see I actually have two versions of this process running right now. And I actually have, both are waiting at this webhook, right? So let's go ahead and actually open up maybe this process, right? So we're waiting here for some webhook, some system to say, we've received a response. And then with that response, right, I'm going to determine like whether this request was confirmed or denied. So actually to do that, let me just go over to Postman real quick, right? So with Postman, I'm just doing this to call our webhook, right? So I've already got that information entered in here. So basically, I'm just saying the user's response was yes. Let me go ahead and send that. Now that I send that request, if I go back to Operate, I should see that this process moved on. Yeah, so I just refreshed my page, and I could see that this completed, and we actually completed the rest of the process, which was actually executing other connectors that we can talk about today as well, right? So now the process ran through, and we also track that information as well, right? For example, if I come down in here, the properties panel in Operate, right? As you're running processes, you see the audit trail, all the activities completed, but you're also getting all the data. So for example, using that webhook, right, we're able to retrieve the user's response, right? And now map that. So you can retrieve data, send events to Camunda, also pass that data and add it to your processes as well, right? That I use to, say, route my process. In this case, just confirming, right, that they did in fact want to update their process. All right. Go back to my model. Actually, let's go back to the presentation. Next thing, we've been talking a lot about different types of connectors, right? We have Twilio. I showed a REST connector. One of the new features we kind of sneakily just added, and you may not have even noticed, is a shortcut for defining and reusing connectors, right? So previously, with all the Camunda connectors that we've been looking at today, like whether it's Twilio, the REST connector, if we're using Slack or SendGrid, even for sending emails, all of these connectors, you define them in the modeler, you add all their properties panels, right? Now, if you had to do that for every process, you could, but you don't necessarily have to. In fact, you may define connectors to various services. For example, the REST connector is a great example. You may be calling an endpoint, and this is, you're accessing some service, and this is something that might apply more broadly across many different use cases, right? You want to make this REST call reusable. Previously, you had to basically create your connector, basically author a JSON file from scratch, right, to create a connector. Now we can actually save connectors directly from the modeler and save templates and reuse them in our web modeler again as well. So we can take a look at that process, right? So let me switch over to my web modeler. Now, all of these connectors, actually, my entire process almost uses connectors except for one step here. But for example, like this Twilio connector, right? Let's take a look at that. To send a confirmation message as an example, I can open up the properties panel. Here it is, pre-configured. Now, if we want to save this, what we could do up here in the upper right, you have this little blue icon that says Save As. If I click that, let's just go ahead and name this. Let's just say, I don't know, just so we can easily find it, like new Twilio connector, right? I'll just call it something like that. So go ahead and save it. Now what we can do is once we save it, we can open up this connector template editor. So here it is pre-configured in the properties panel, right? You can see all those details. Now here's that JSON file that is displayed. So ultimately, at the end of the day, a connector template is this JSON file that you see. Now again, previously, what you had to do was like actually, a developer would have to create this, right? If an end user wanted to save a connector, they would have to like create this file, add it, right, to Camunda, the web modeler, and make it usable to the end user. Now you don't have to be a developer to do this. You could click that save button. And then really what we need to do, we're looking at the configured template here. We got to click this publish button, right? This blue button that says publish. When you click it, you've got two options. You can make this connector available only in the project that you're working on, right? So for example, if you have something configured in a way that you don't want to expose it broadly across the organization, maybe you have multiple processes in a project that you want to reuse this in, you could just publish it locally to your project. Or if this is a connector that you want to reuse anybody to be able to access this pre-configured connector, which may be useful, right? Imagine you're a developer and you're creating a bunch of reusable assets for business users, right? To just easily drag and drop into their process. We could set that to publish to organization, right? So I'll just call this, I'll just give it the same name, like my new Twilio connector V1, right? And I'll just hit publish. So now what we can actually do, let me just I'll close that up, go back to our modeler, right? Now, if I wanted to say drop a new step into this process as an example, right? Make a little bit of room. I can add a new step to my process and I'll click the wrench, right? Like I did before. So here's all our normal BPM elements. We have connectors, but if I scroll through, I should at a point see, there's my new Twilio connector right there, right? And as a shortcut, right? If I didn't want to scroll through all that, I could just start typing in here. There's my new Twilio connector, right? I just added it. And if I open the properties panel, right, I could see that it's got all my same configuration, from how this connector was previously configured as well, right? So easy way to save the connectors. And that applies to basically everything, right? Not just Twilio, but we also can create, connector templates for the REST connector as an example, right? So I can select that, click Save As, right? And then do the same thing. Just save a new connector template for reusability as an example there. It's a really handy feature, and you can do that with all of our connectors now. All right. We already covered the new inbound connector, one of them being that webhook, right? So just wanted to highlight that we also have this available with like RabbitMQ and Kafka, Amazon SQS and SNS. Just showed the webhook today because that's pretty universal, pretty easy to use, and easy to demonstrate, right, in a demo type of situation. But webhook, very powerful as well. All right, now one other feature, we do have a few minutes remaining, right? So one other feature I wanted to also bring up, not so much a product feature per se, well, not at least in the web modeler, but we did bring a new dashboard to Optimize. So Optimize, I just switched over to the Optimize web application, which again, you can also access through your console, right? So when you're on your management console here, you have all your Camunda web apps. You could just launch Optimize directly from your management console. Now, Optimize is like your process intelligence tool. So think of it like a BI-like tool where we create reports and dashboards. And we have a new template of a dashboard for you. So without really doing anything else, let me go ahead and create just a new folder. So in Optimize, you can organize your reports and dashboards. We call them collections. So let's just say this is our update account. I don't know, collection. We just go ahead and add our update account details process. Let's create that. All right. So when you create a new folder, right, what we can do is create reports and dashboards. I'll go over here. I'll click on create new. We can create dashboard. Now we have this new dashboard here. It's called an instant preview. Previously, the template, one of the only template dashboards we had was this process performance overview. But now we have this new dashboard here called the instant preview, which I'll go ahead and add our update account details process. Now, this probably won't give us a ton of data because I've only recently started running this process. But here's just an out-of-the-box template that is generated for us, right? We can see the number of running processes, how many were started in the last 7 days, any tasks that have experienced incidents, right? Where they've occurred, and we could even see like how long do they take to complete. So this is one of our default dashboards that pops up. You can also down here see which tasks take the most amount of time. We could hover over each element, right, and see how much time on average we've spent on each activity. But this dashboard, right, so this was one that used to be part of one of our default dashboards, but you couldn't save it as a template. Now this is an out-of-the-box template, which we can continue to edit and optimize, right? So you have this dashboard. And one of the other things I wanted to make note of too, what's cool about this template is you'll also notice like we now have some new elements. So like this right here is a new text field. We actually have, you'll see some banners here, right? We have this image. We have another image here. We have this box over here that has this nice text field, right? So we could actually come in and start, adding more details about our dashboard here. So you can start to add commentary about your processes, right? And edit that information in your dashboards as well. So we just brought a couple new components, right? So just to I guess you could say jazz up your dashboards, you can now start to add images, text and commentary, and you can use a dashboard like this, right? Kind of as a default starting point. But again, we're free to continue to edit, right? And move these dashboards around. So for example, if I just wanted to remove that, resize this a bit, make it a little bit bigger, right? We could still go ahead. We could add new reports to this dashboard, right? And change the look and feel. But maybe just one last point that was worth mentioning. All right, so I think that is it for the moment. Happy to maybe do some Q&A if we have some questions, and even talk about what's next coming up.
Thank you so much. That was super fun. I saw some comments saying cool, so I'm glad that people liked it. That was really cool. Close features of Camunda, definitely a great title for that presentation. Before we jump into Q&A, I would like to plug CamundaCon. CamundaCon is September 27th and 28th in New York City, but there will be a virtual option. We do have a booth, so I'm going to put the tickets in the chat if you would like to go to that, the virtual booth or the in-person. Love to have you. Love to see you there. That would be super fun. I know Emilio is going, so we would love to see you there. Yeah, so let's open it to Q&A. Thanks so much, Kevin. That was great.
Yeah, my pleasure. And I will also be at CamundaCon. So
I was gonna ask. Super fun, New York City. It was in Berlin last year, so glad we have it in the States this year. That is okay. If nobody has questions, we will. I had a question at the beginning saying, where will this recording be? We will email you guys the recording after the presentation is done. And we will also post it on our NTConsult page on YouTube. So there will be access to this recording. We do want to do future events, probably one this year, another one this year for this community. We are technically the San Diego community, but we welcome anybody from across the world. Anybody who wants to be part of a Camunda community is welcome to be here. I don't see any questions in the chat. What's next, Kevin? Is there something else Camunda-wise?
Well, I think the main thing is CamundaCon taking place the 27th and 28th. So just wanted to plug that. But yeah, a lot of what I was demonstrating today too, right, was some of it's available right now to play around with in the web modeler, like connector templates and such, right? The Twilio Connector. Some are in alpha and coming with our 8.3 release. So that's really what's next is we have, twice a year, every 6 months, we have a minor release of Camunda. The next one is coming second week of October. That will be version 8.3, some of which we're looking at, some of which some new features we haven't seen yet, but bringing really important feature enhancements, right, to our platform. So really looking forward to that. And along with CamundaCon, right? So, take your pick. Like, what's going to be the more interesting event? Is it CamundaCon? Is it your release?
Okay. When will the certification on Camunda 8 be available?
When is this in terms of like developer certification for? If I'm in term.
Maria, can you expand on that question? Developers.
Yes, I know our team is working on that. So our training team and through Camunda Academy. So I don't know if that's exactly when that's going to be available, but we do have training courses being developed in progress for certification. We have a number of training courses already out on Camunda Academy that are pretty comprehensive. So you can definitely take a look at that. But yes, we do plan on rolling out an actual certification process for Camunda developers for version 8, and that should be coming sooner than later.
Good. Thank you, Maria, for that question. I am so glad everybody came. Thank you so much. Hopefully you learned something and participate in these events in the future. I'm going to stop recording, and we will stay on for a couple more minutes if people want to ask any more questions, but you are welcome to have a great rest of your day. Anything, we are super glad you guys came.